You give me a time and place, I give you a 5-minute window. Anything happens in that 5 minutes and I'm yours, no matter what. Anything happens a minute either side of that, and you're on your own. Do you understand?
Oh man, I know this. Is that from Drive?
It is from Drive.
Oh, excellent. I was just thinking about that movie today. Nicholas Winding Refn. I was listening to a YouTube video. It was of Tommy Wiseau and his friend at this record store, and they were saying Drive was one of their favorite movies, and so that got me thinking about Drive. Um, oh, awesome! Were you a fan of Baby Driver by Edgar Wright?
I own a steelbook of Baby Driver. I love that movie.
Oh goodness. I have issues with Baby Driver. For some reason, I guess I'm not sure what I was expecting, but whenever I watched that movie, like, I don't know, the main character just seems so smug to me that, I don't know. I was comparing like the chase scene at the beginning of Baby Driver to the one at Drive and just remembering how much more I like the Drive one. So,
Well, Drive is actually a movie I want to rewatch because I like Drive, but I apparently don't hold it as high as a lot of other people do. So it is one that I want to rewatch, especially as much as I like Ryan Gosling.
very cool. Oh, and by the way, you're listening to the Average Joe's Movie Club cast, and you just got a fair shake about what this show is all about. Us talking about a bunch of movies that come up all of a sudden in our show. And that's what we're about. I'm Justin.
And I'm Joey.
Welcome, everyone. And just in case you're new to our show, there are going to be spoilers all over the place. We're all about talking about movies in depth, every which way. So if you hear a movie come up they haven't seen yet, you don't want spoiled for you, I suggest put on those earmuffs and fast forward a little bit, and hopefully we'll be on to something you have seen, and you can join the conversation in the comments as well, and let us know if we're completely wrong about a movie or if we're spot on. So we'd love to hear from you. All right, Joey, what's going on in this show?
All right, so our featured movie on this episode is Akira Kurosawa's Dodes'ka-den from 1970, his first foray into color film. And so, Justin, what led you to put this on your list?
All right, so Dodes'ka-den. I had first heard about this movie. There was a YouTuber named there's a YouTube channel called Razor Wire Reviews, and he did a whole Kurosawa in color marathon. And since this is his first film in color, this was the first one he talked about, and it seemed really interesting. And I mean, regardless, I want to watch all the Kurosawa movies eventually, but I did have a little bit of an idea of what this was about. It was in like the top 30 of my to watch list. It just kind of ended up there. And so I was like, oh, I need a Kurosawa for my movie club list. Dodes'ka-den, here it would. And I guess it mostly kind of stemmed from the fact that I might not have went to this movie as quickly if it wasn't for, our club. So that's how it ended up in there. So Dodes'ka-den, just to give you, so I looked on Wikipedia and there wasn't a clear synopsis, so I kind of cobbled this together. Basically, it's an anthology film of overlapping vignettes exploring the lives of a variety of characters who live in this shanty town outside of Tokyo. The title, Dodes'ka-den, is actually a play on words. It's referencing like clickety-clack like a train. And so whenever you watch the film, you are introduced to this young boy who is quite obsessed with trains. And so that's where the name of the film comes into play there. So you picked this from my list, Joey. So what did you think of Dodes'ka-den?
So this is, I think this was my fourth. Yeah, this was my fourth Kurosawa film, and it was very, very different from the first three. Besides being in color, it was just a far departure from the other ones, which were all samurai movie, and this one, being somewhat modern. I mean, comparatively modern. Being set, I guess, 50 to 60 years ago is very much more modern compared to feudal Japan. Um, so all the colors, if you read my review on the colors, especially like red and yellow, and blue, but especially in the red and the yellow, like really popped on the screen, which is not surprising coming from Kurosawa. I mean, this man, with the black and white movies, just he knew what he was doing behind the camera, so that wasn't surprising. The stories themselves, the characters, it was, there was a lot of development, character development. That's what I'm shooting for. Um, and they all built very. You had the father and the son that lived in the car. You had the two wives who kept switching husbands, saying that men were trash. You had the boy who had the imaginary train, which is where the title came from, and it was all really different. But I don't know. The movie felt, to me, it felt infinity long. Like it just, like I don't know. I felt like for like something was going to tie it together, and it was like you said in the description, it's an anthology, which I guess I shouldn't have expected that. I don't know. It was a great piece of art. It just, I did not find it very entertaining overall.
All right. Um, some great points there. So, yeah, like I didn't totally go into this blind since I did know about the kid saying the clickety clack Dodes'ka-den thing. Um, I was kind of, so I So out of all Kurosawa's films I've seen, I think this one might be the most humanist. Like you definitely have your war Kurosawa films like Seven Samurai and Ran. Now I haven't seen Ikiru, which I believe has a real humanist slant to it in terms of coping with someone coming to the end of their life. But in terms of this being about a bunch of poor people really making the best of this really cruddy situation they're in. I felt like that humanist angle he was going for, with really trying to show the bright side of life, even in the worst of circumstances. And I really felt that this kid with this whole illusion of a train really, he's going clickety click, clickety clack, pushing himself forward in life, kind of completely oblivious to how bad he has it. Like it's kind of funny in the beginning, they do that little chant to Buddha, which kind of takes you off guard with how like loud and robust that was. So I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And he's like, Mom, you're so silly. You're so silly, because she's all worrying about him. And it's just because he is so like clueless on, how bad they have it. But he really, at the same time, you got to admire that he has this positive attitude as he imagines this train that's, no matter what happens, they're moving forward and he has a job to do, regardless of, I guess, how everybody else sees him.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I thought maybe was something was kind of off with the kid, but yeah, I mean, that's the way to go about it. I mean, obviously, I picked up that the mom was worried, and I think was worried about their whole just situation in general. Like, hey, how are we going to eat, etc. Type of deal, and then she was like, hey, pray,
Mm-hmm.
Buddha, make my mom smarter, whatever the exact line was, and I was just like, oh wow, that was kind of brazen thing to say. And then he just gets in, runs the train
Mm-hmm.
every day, and it was, oh, I got to get maintenance to fix the train. It's an old train, but they got to keep up with it. It was real funny. And
Yeah, I thought Kurosawa did a really good job with actually putting in little sound effects, like what he would probably hear in his mind. Like you can tell it's an illusion because he very carefully walks all around the train, like as if it was there, really setting up this illusion to make us really believe, what the kid must have in his mind. So I thought that was all set up really well. So we don't think he's a nutball. We're really um, I think we're set up to have the best intentions of him as possible. Although that is contrasted a few moments later when you see that like the children of the town are like, "Hey, here comes the train freak."
Yeah, it was just a very interesting thing that that's basically all the one kid did. There was nothing, like part of me having seen some outlandish movies throughout my day. I was kind of expecting a movie like for him to put the other kid, the kid who was sleeping in the car, put him on the train to go find his house or something, which of course didn't happen. That was another thing. Why didn't we ever get to see that kid's house, the dream house that him and his father kept talking about? I was like,
Only a fantasy.
it's like, I wanted that house.
Have you seen Florida Project before?
Floor project? Mm-mm, I have not.
Florida. Okay, the way you just described that reminds me of the end of Florida Project. So maybe if you ever catch that, that might come back in your mind. Um, so, like I had said, so I was familiar with kind of the premise, but I didn't realize it was an anthology story either. And so when I came in, and so they set up the whole beginning is a nice setup to this kid with the pretend train, but then it goes into all these other stories, which we'll get into, and it reminded me a lot of this director I've become more familiar with over the last couple of years, named Robert Altman, and he had a film that came out 5 years after this called Nashville, which is a very similar thing to where they're in the town of Nashville and it's all about all these country stars kind of doing their own little performances. And the through line for the whole story is this political car that's kind of going through town, kind of raising up support for this one candidate. And the film ends with them all going to this political rally. And so I kind of get a sense that Robert Altman might have borrowed from Kurosawa because it has a very similar feel to it. All the characters being in this town and what it is like for life in this town, and with this kid with the imaginary train being the through line. And have you ever seen Love Actually?
Love Actually. Which one is Love Actually? I mean, I've heard the name.
It's a British movie. It's a kind of a Christmas movie. It's about a bunch of about. It's kind of an anthology story as well, where there's a bunch of people in Britain all kind of having uh, different variations of love going on in their little stories, and it jumps back and forth.
It's is Alan Rickman in it? Maybe.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't. I think it was one I intended to see and never did because I did
Okay.
Valentine's Day, but recently, but I
Yeah.
don't think I haven't seen that one because I did a bunch of them like all around the same time and like within a couple of years of each other. They did
Yeah, a
like
couple of years, one after another. Yeah, that's a similar premise. So I'd be really interested to see. So I consider all these to be large cast movies where it does jump back and forth, and so Robert Altman really definitely he has been considered as one of the big pioneers of this. There's his film Nashville, and then in '91, I believe it was, he did a film called Shortcuts. And you know who PTA is. He did a version of that as well called Magnolia. So throughout the last, every couple decades, you get these movies that have these large casts that jump back and forth. And so I found it really interesting that I think this film might actually inspired some of that. So, but yeah, I definitely recommend checking out Altman's work and PTA's Magnolia. We actually have an Altman film on my movie club list. It's called Long Good Friday. I don't think it's a large cast film, but at least you'll get your you'll kind of start to learn a little bit about Altman whenever we get around to him there. But getting back to Dodes'ka-den, I guess I wanted to mention that I really enjoyed the music at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie. It's kind of it's bookended. It's kind of like I was saying, it's kind of a dismal movie because we are, in this kind of a trash heap of a town, but it's this like flute music that kind of gives you this more positive feel. And I had heard somewhere in a YouTube video that Kurosawa actually might have switched to color, particularly for this story, just to make sure it wasn't feeling too drab.
okay. I mean that I could see that.
Yeah, definitely a good time for it, and to make sure it's not too depressing with black and white. Not sure. Yeah, I get, especially because whenever you get brought into the home of this kid, like all like you can see, his obsession with trains, with all the art that's all over the walls, and it really brings you into this kind of imaginative world and
Yeah,
kind of
that
an
was
upbeat
yeah.
way to start things out. So going back into the side stories of Dodes'ka-den, you had, I think the first story is the wife swapping drunkards. And so I thought it was neat how Kurosawa like had one couple that was in red and one couple that was in yellow to distinguish who was who. Although I'm kind of ashamed to admit that I didn't really realize that was going on the first time I watched it. It wasn't until I was reading about the plot afterwards that I caught on to that. But thinking back on it, it was really clever that he did color code them in order to, I hope, help most people follow along with that part of the story.
I I didn't notice that either. I don't think I don't remember noticing that. I just paid attention to every time that happened, you had the little kind of gaggle of people. I guess the gaggle of women around the water hose or the water faucet in the center. They were always like, "Oh, they switched husbands," and it was like, "Oh yeah, they did, didn't they?" And then so don't feel bad. I didn't notice it either.
One thing I did really notice about the yellow couple is the lady with the shirt had those squiggles on her shirt, which was really kind of crazy looking. I think that shows up on the DVD cover too. Um, so that was really neat visually. And yeah, that was the next group I was going to get to was the gossiping women. And they I think stood out the most to me whenever they were talking about the guy with the tick. Which, oh my gosh, was that a tick?
Yeah, it really was. But I mean, honestly, dude. Like I said when we were talking a little bit before cast, um, there were just parts of
Hmm.
this movie where this movie felt really long, and the only thing I really remember the gossiping
Yeah.
women talking about were the wife swapping people. I'm not even gonna lie, and there were just parts of this movie that just drug, and I remember that there was a guy with the tick. I couldn't really tell you much else other than that, and I know that's bad. I just
It's now I would say for the most part it kind of felt like this movie was flying by, but granted, I watched it in two chunks, so that's the big difference there with me. When I was watching it, I kind of started it really late at night, and it was about an hour into it, and I was starting to get a little sleepy. Whenever there's this really humanist scene that I told you about before we started casting, that it just has this guy who's just kind of staring off blankly, and this woman comes and she's like helping him do stuff. I was reading in a synopsis that this might have been like an ex-wife of his, but they were just sitting there just kind of ripping fabric, and it was this real slow quiet moment, and it really kind of felt like one of those. I'm not even sure how to describe it now. It just felt really human. These people just sitting there having a quiet moment together. Um,
yeah, I was just like what more of along the opposite side of like, okay, this guy's just sitting here and he's ripping fabric, and then the lady started ripping fabric, and I was like, all right, I don't really know what to make of this.
Yeah, just other than the fact that she must have
Yeah,
cared for him if she was willing to, sit there with him like that. Um, Going back to the guy with the tick, because that actually was one of the stories that connected with me most. Um, there's a scene where the guy with the tick brings his like business friends to his house, and they start like, and so they meet his wife, and his wife is not very personable at all. She's like, "Oh, whatever, you guys are here. I'm going into the other room so you guys can talk." And he's just like, oh, I can't believe you're married to her. She's not personable at all, and I just feel so bad for you. And then the guy like gets so mad and like attacks him, and so I could kind of relate with this a little bit because my whole life I've been wife who I've been with for 19 years. A lot of times in high school and college, people always kind of thought of her as not being the warmest person. So whenever I saw that part, and it's like, oh yeah, I can definitely relate with somebody kind of saying, "Hey, why are you with her? She's not the nicest person." But I mean, some people are like that, and yeah, so I definitely related with the fact that these folks are like saying, "Oh, why do you like this? Why I feel so bad about you with this person," and he's just like, "Hey, that's my wife you're talking about." And I mean, some people are introverts and some people are extroverts, and so sometimes you don't see all of a person. So yeah, I mean, you can see both sides of the coin. Like, yeah, that person's being really cold to those people, but at the same time, you don't really know that person, so why would you tell that person that? So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, especially considering the time and stuff that they're said in Japan. The friends of that guy, they were offended, or at least that's how I perceived it. I perceived them to be offended because the man's wife was supposed to serve them, the food that they were doing. He was supposed to
Hmm.
cook cook them the meal that they were about to eat and then serve them. And she's like, "No, I'm going to the bath." And they were like, "Yo, what the hell is this broad doing?" Kind of feel to it. And then he was like that. Why are you married to her? She's not being a very good wife. And he was like, "Y'all need to chill out. Like, this is my wife.
Hmm.
Y'all don't know what you're talking about." And didn't fight or whatever. And the one guy was just like, "I'm not trying to offend you. I respect you, but yo, your wife's bad. Like, she's not a good wife." And he's like, "Yo, you disrespected me.
Right.
You need to chill out." And it was like, because Japan was always the wives were always you know always serve
Yeah.
the man, always serve the husband style thing. So it was very interesting to see that level of, I don't know if it was, I guess, their marriage was more equality. Like, they had a much more equal stance because he was cooking the food and stuff. So it was very interesting take there.
Yeah,
So
I'm glad you mentioned. Yeah, in terms of like formal Japanese, I'm not quite familiar with the customs, but from my knowledge, yeah, it's been a very like um, a culture where yeah, the women do those kind of roles, and that's seen as custom. And those guys were like, hey, what's up with this? With the couple being on more of a equal footing, so to say. Um, I thought a really nice story that we see is so there's the town kind of floozy, kind of a loose lady, so to speak, and she has a lot of kids. And you meet the guy, I guess she's married to, and he's just like the sweetest little guy. He's always smiling. And there's a real sweet scene where there's this whole bushel of kids, and like, hey, we love you so much, dad, but we know you're not really our dad. And he's like, hey, look, I'm the one here raising you guys, so I'm your dad. And I
yeah,
thought that was
he
a
was
really
like,
sweet
I'm
moment.
I'm I'm your dad, right? I'm raising you. I'm your dad. So, and I mean, we've all had that. I mean, I have I have both a stepfather, a stepmother. You know, I'm I can relate to that in certain degrees. You all have that person, or someone whose parent isn't around at all in some variety, and they have a step parent who,
Right.
or aunt, uncle, whatever, who raises them, and so that person is their parent.
And then you have the real unfortunate kind of a gut punch of a story where you follow along with this
Yeah.
young girl and her uncle, and yeah, so there's a rape. um, yeah, it was kind of odd. Like I didn't really see that moment coming, but she's like kind of just laying there. I didn't know if she was like. It kind of seemed like she might have been like doing her own thing sexually at first, and then all of a sudden he comes up and
Well,
he's just
yeah,
like,
like
hey there. And there's a little bit of symbolism there because she was like it looked like she was like laying on like a bed of flowers, so maybe he was like flowering her. So what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, because it seemed like with her, like they were trying to set up her getting with the delivery boy.
Right.
Because he kept bringing her stuff and he kept talking. I guess making the deliveries of the sake for her uncle, who was a drunkard and was working her to death while she was working
Mhm.
for her sick aunt. And it seemed like those two were going to hit it off, and then the whole rape happened, and um, that kind of changed that whole story, obviously, in a very dark way, because then
Yeah.
her aunt comes back, and then she just goes and stabs the delivery boy.
And before we move on, those shots of whenever she meets up with the delivery boy, it's like a really, really wide shot. And it looks like there's some cement at the bottom and there's this big open sky. I think that was probably some of my favorite photography in the whole show. It was like, it really stood out compared to everything that was shot pretty nice and tight. And that was the one instance where it's wide. And I think it might have to do with the fact that how alone she must feel in these instances, like after, having that happen to her. And like you probably were about to get to it, to the fact that, she probably felt powerless on how to, explain that her, she was assaulted by her uncle. And so the only way she knew to do something is, stab this boy, to really get, let her feelings out somehow.
Yeah, and I thought that the way they proceeded after that is when the cops come up and ask about it, and they say, "Oh, there's been an assault," and they just the aunt and uncle just assume that she's the one being attacked, and then they say, "Oh, she was the assaulter," and then they start wanting to ask the uncle questions, and he starts acting super squirrely, and obviously we know he's guilty, but then the aunt's
Mm-hmm.
even like, what are you, you're not acting like, you're acting really weird. And me and my roommate were just talking about, like, yo, he's doing everything to just might as well just paint a big just guilty across his face. Like, I mean, it was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
And as bad as he was, I mean, I hate to say this, but it was kind of played a little comical with how, like, oh, am I going to get away with it? Am I not? Do I got to hit? No. Do I got to get the hell out of here? So, really unfortunate situation, but I think Kurosawa made it as palatable as,
yeah, I
as
mean, there was a little
possible.
bit of that. I mean, I think it's almost the way the Japanese do a lot of things. Like, I don't watch a ton of anime, but that is the way they do things in super serious moments. Is the super serious character all of a sudden is drawn in that chibi art style, and then they're doing something funny. It's just they kind of put a humor spin onto it. I guess kind of maybe break
Yeah,
some tension sometimes. But yeah, it was almost in a comical way, like you said, that he
yeah.
was like, "Am I going to get away with it? Haha!" It's like, nah, fam.
But yeah, he does end up. I think he does split, so I guess he does get away with it in the end. But I think, she is able to, you know, let the cops know what happened. All right, so moving on, the next one I have would be, I think, I keep coming to each one of these things. I'm thinking, oh, this is the pivotal story. This is the pivotal story, but this probably is the pivotal story. Is the poor man and his son, where you know that whole fantastical part of the story comes back to where he's just sitting with his son, and there's like, oh, one day we're gonna have this beautiful house. What color house do you want it to be? And he's like, white. It's very unimaginative, the kid is, compared to his dad. And he's like, well, what if it's, I think he says orange or something, and this image in their mind instantly turns orange. So that's another example of Kurosawa really playing up being able to use color. And yeah, it's really enduring to hear them talk about this dream house that they're going to have one day. At the same time, they're starving in the slum. And I think the scene that stood out most to me was at one point is like, we're gonna have a pool too, and it zooms up on him, and I think it starts on him and then it zooms out really big, and it's like the most like enormous pool you've ever seen.
That pool was ginormous. It was like an Olympic size pool.
And it's really subtle, I guess, how the kid gets sick, because you're seeing the kid all of a sudden in this restaurant, and they're like, oh, we'll give him some scraps, And then before too long, he doesn't start feeling too good, and it gets pretty bad.
Yeah, and then the townspeople are like, take him to the doctor, and he's like, no, no, it'll be fine. And it was just,
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that
yeah,
part. Yeah, it's really tragic. Like some of those large cast movies I was telling you about earlier, there's always like this pivotal scene towards the end that starts wrapping things up. And so, spoiler alert again, the little kid dies. And I think that's really the gut punch. That's really the height of, how awful, this the situation is for the town. And I think that's the pinnacle of it.
yeah, that was having watched, you watch most movies, they give you the kind of good ending, and you kept just kind of expecting that the dad would eventually like take him to a doctor, and he just never did.
Yeah. But then, I mean, at the end of the day, as in as enduring and thoughtful, and so you really go through all these stories kind of follow the same emotional beat to where it's all like unfortunate situations and people doing the best with what they can. So I guess in terms of that, the film is kind of one note, and maybe that's the reason it felt really long to you. Um, But at the end of the day, I would say that the kid with the train is definitely the highlight for me. I mean, it's named after him. It's fun to kind of check in with him in the middle of the movie, because there's a scene where he's like, Dodes'ka-den, Dodes'ka-den, Dodes'ka-den. And all of a sudden he stops and he's like, hey, what are you doing on my tracks? You could have got hurt. That was pretty comical, and it really reinforces the fact that this kid is like totally in this state of mind to where he's the tram operator, and he has to he can't get in his way, I guess.
Yeah, it's his train, and you got to get off his tracks, or you're going to get hurt.
For a tram operator, he doesn't seem to have many passengers. I think he's missing that part of the equation.
Yeah, might need a few, maybe to get someone in on the get in on with him there, but
Yeah, but I thought it wrapped up really sweetly where they pipe up that kind of the whistle penny whistle theme towards the end, and he parks his tram. He's like, oh, like you mentioned earlier, we need to do some maintenance on this thing for tomorrow. Really setting that train of thought where he did his hard work for the day, and now a day's done. And they show that silhouette of him, and he hangs up his hat, and he's done, and that's the end of the film. Really highlighting the fact that life goes on, and it's what you make of it. Was kind of the theme that I pulled away from it.
all right, I could see that.
Yeah, man. So yeah, I guess I like you probably know I'm probably used to watching a few more slower movies here and there, so maybe I'm a little bit more adjusted to slower paced ones. But yeah, I thought this one it definitely had its slow moments. I admit I watched it in two chunks, so it probably wasn't didn't stand out to me as much. But that second part of it really kind of was flying by to where we were learning out each of the different people's stories. I would say it's. I mean, if you're a Kurosawa fan, of course you got to watch them all. And this one definitely has some neat moments, but it's more of kind of a tearjerker slash emotional one. It's not one I ever really see myself returning to. I gave it a 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. It's a very good film, but it didn't hook into me enough to where I would really want to rewatch it and it'd be excellent. So just really good for me.
Um, I gave it 4, mainly because of how good all of the cinematography and camera work and stuff was, and all the storylines were really good. I didn't want to take away off of the rating just because I felt like there was some stuff that I missed and just didn't pick up on.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like I probably just in the line of Kurosawa movies, I probably don't really see myself returning to it. But of course, if you're a big Kurosawa fan, and I've seen 4, and I do want to see them all, I just don't really probably see myself going back to it.
Yeah, I would definitely consider it kind of in the middle of the pack. Like, actually, a film I could talk about here in a few minutes. Kind of explain my. Anyways, so basically, yeah, in the middle of the pack, there's definitely some ones I like less that I thought were less watchable, but yeah, this is a pretty good one. Definitely check it out. All right, so moving on with our show. So, Joey, this is the part of the show where we talk about what we've watched recently and what we got coming up next. So, what have you been watching?
All right. So the last couple ones I checked out, I caught John Wick Chapter 3 yesterday, and I caught The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo the day before that, or actually, I guess, night before that. So those are the last two movies I've watched. John Wick Chapter 3. So I'm sure people have picked up that I do like the really stylized movies like that, fast paced. Like I said in my review, they turned the knob to 12 and just broke it off. There was no stops really. It was if you haven't seen it, I mean it's been out for a few weeks. It's number one for a week or two. So I feel like most people have seen it, but it was really fast paced, just like those movies are in the franchise. I did not like it as much as the first two, which I mean, I love the first two. I think they're both really great. I think this one was just kind of a step down comparatively. Like the action scenes were still great. Keanu was still great. It's just having just a little bit less story and replacing it with more action. I just felt that kind of took away from it. And then, have you seen it?
No, I have the only John Wick I've seen was number one. Um, I have number two available. I just for some reason I haven't been in a big action kick to dive into that one. So no, only seen part one so far.
I got you. And then the one thing that bothered me, and I won't necessarily go into specifics for your sake, but um, so for as much as they can be, they generally try to stay rooted in base realism as much as they can. Like it's not like the 90s action movies where you see Sly or Arnold and they just look like they should be dead, or the enemy looks like they should be dead and they're not. Like this person gets shot in the head, you know or shot in the throat, they're dead. And then there was a couple instances in this movie where they shied away from that, and that kind of just took me out of it. When you went two movies, two and a half movies, and then all of a sudden that strategy or that formula changes. So, but overall, I still really enjoyed it. But the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I loved that movie. That was a 2.5 hour movie that flew by, especially since I started it at like almost midnight. And I did not realize it was a David Fincher movie until I went to go log it and saw his name pop up, and I was just like, oh my god, this is like the more movies I watch by him, the more I want to watch. Like I was just captivated from the word, like from the jump, and it was very well paced. I also anything that has strong women kicking ass, I'm about. And when you have James Bond in a movie and he's not even the most badass person in the movie, like what are you gonna do? Like so those are the two I've watched most recently. Um, Coming up, I'm probably gonna try to watch. I want to try to watch the new Godzilla, seeing as I also just watched the OG Godzilla, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But that's the plan, is to try to go watch the new Godzilla.
Very cool. And all right, so what have I watched recently that I want to talk about? So, like I alluded to at the end of Dodes'ka-den, there's some Kurosawa films that I'm not as into, and that happens to be Yojimbo and Sanjuro. And I don't know what it is about these movies. Like I love the Man with No Name trilogy for the most part. Like A Few Dollars More is my favorite of those. But just something about Yojimbo and Sanjuro is just it's just so much slower than what you would think it would be for this like Ronin warrior kind of thing. There's so much more emphasis on like ha ha ha, I outfooled you on this, or it's just not, you just come into it thinking like, oh, these are remakes of these Clint Eastwood, classics. It's going to be, and Kurosawa, Seven Samurai, action packed, and it's not that at all. So I mean, there's some good moments in there, like the end of Sanjuro. There's a really cool final. Well, actually, it's a cool final showdown, but it's a really really quick one. So I'd be interested to hear more about what you thought of those. And the other film I'll mention is Aladdin. So yeah, like I said a few episodes ago, I was really dreading Aladdin, and I guess it kind of matched my expectation of why I wasn't going to like it. It's just not as good as the original cartoon. Like, and some of the things that got me were they did a lot of good things. Like Will Smith does a bang up job in it. The girl who plays Jasmine does amazing. It's really cool to see her like an actual like woman in these amazing outfits being a princess and being a real strong character. But then you'd have the music and it would get going and you'd hear like the theme and I get the little, chills in the back of my neck like, "Oh, I love my Aladdin music. Let's hear it." And then the singing is so much not as good. And so it just like the whole time, it's like you have this big bubble and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to enjoy my bubble." And all of a sudden it starts getting smaller and smaller. And then you have no bubble anymore. And you're like, "What happened to my bubble?" So, um, it had its moments. I can't, for the life of me, I don't understand why people love this movie so much. Because I guess maybe just because it's so close to my heart that I take it a little bit more personally. That they just didn't. It's just not that. It's just not the original Aladdin, and it can never be the original Aladdin because Robin Williams made the original Aladdin what it was, and I think it's the fact that like Beauty and the Beast didn't bother me because so for the most part, Beauty and the Beast went beat for beat, like what that story was, and the songs, like the singing wasn't as good, and but it didn't really bother me, maybe because I'm not as connected to that. But then with Aladdin, so much of that movie is the comedy, and whenever you're just saying the same jokes again, maybe with a slightly different twist, it's not as funny. It's not the same delivery, and it really doesn't flow like the original does. So I'll leave it at that with that. I had some problems with Aladdin.
Okay, but to that end, so I feel in this situation, so they did a remake, they did a live action
Yeah.
remake. For good or for bad, they went ahead and it got greenlit and they made it. That's beside the point at this stage because been made. But so they told the same jokes with little twist here and there. But if they had completely overhauled the jokes, so they had changed the jokes and they were completely different, would be having a conversation about how maybe not you and I, but maybe so, but how would do you think the overall populace would be behaving if the jokes were completely different? Because now part of this beloved movie from their childhood is completely different. The dialogue of, how much ever percentage of it is completely different. That nostalgia factor of they changed this joke and they changed that joke and they changed this joke.
Mhm.
So, you know,
Yeah, that's a great point,
it,
and it's hard to say because that's not how it. I mean, I will say I think one of my favorite parts of the movie is after Prince Ali gets to the castle or whatever, and they need some time to just kind of have the characters in the setting for a moment. They go to this dance, and there's this really like elaborate like dance routine that they do, and that's all new and fresh. And I really appreciated parts that were new and fresh. But yeah, it's a great point. The fact that if it didn't follow beat for beat a lot of these elements, and so much of the original is comedy to where what else do they have to follow? But I just don't think it works being remade, and I'd rather it not exist.
and then also how, and I'm not saying you, but I know a lot of people. I've seen people say only because Robin Williams passed away that this movie shouldn't be made. Like that if Robin Williams was still alive and could be the genie, then it would be fine, or things of that nature, things similar. And I'm like, but that's not exactly how remakes work. you know.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. For better or for worse, like you said, they got greenlit, so they gotta. And it's almost like a flawed system to where they've been mandated to make these movies, and so they do the best. But I mean, how do you remake a masterpiece? I mean, the whole point of a remake, it should be better than the original, and just by it being in like live action with a few new plot elements, it's really hard to remake a film in general. But to remake a masterpiece is damn well impossible, I think.
um, so what I try to tell people, so like, me and you are big fans of the MCU. I don't know a lot about the comic book versions of those movies. I know some of the characters I knew from, watching like the Fox cartoons as a kid. But I don't really know the comic
Yeah.
books. And I see a lot of times people go, oh, well, this movie was bad because they didn't do XYZ just like the comic book, blah, blah, blah. And I've talked to a lot of people about this, and it's like they're adaptations. So you take this Aladdin live action film, it's an adaptation of the animated film. Is it as good? Probably not.
Right.
I haven't seen it, and I don't know if I will. Or at least not for a while. I'm probably not going to go to the theater. I don't have, three kids to go see it with. If my daughter lived with me,
Right.
probably I probably would have seen it, but as she doesn't, probably not going to happen. But so maybe that's just a way that these live action adaptations coming out. They're just adaptations, and we can't hold them with the same regard, because the two that I have seen have both been pretty good. Being Beauty and the Beast and Jungle Book, they have both been pretty good adaptations. I haven't have I seen? I was saying I can't remember if I've seen Cinderella or not. No, I don't. I think I was going to, and I never saw Cinderella. And I mean, it looks like the Lion King one's going to be pretty good, but I mean, I feel like they're putting two out really close to one another as well.
Yeah, there might be some burnout, like and they're starting getting some backlash with Star Wars doing two of those a year. I think Beauty and the Beast and or not. I haven't seen Cinderella. Jungle Book I've seen, and I think they'll be. I guess I like Jungle Book a lot more because I mean they followed those main story beats in Jungle Book, but Jungle Book is so short in general that I don't know. Maybe that's not the case because Aladdin's short too. But I just felt like they. It felt like a different movie compared to the original, to where it felt like John Favreau really made that feel fresh, and I like the fresh parts of Aladdin. And here's hoping that the Lion King blows us away. We'll see.
Hopefully so. I mean, oh God, nah. I mean, voice of Simba. So Childish Gambino. Donald Glover. There we go. Donald Glover. Feel like he's going to do good. Bring James Earl Jones back. So I mean, they've got some good casting for the voices. Let's just hope that the story is fine. What they do with, they don't go anything too crazy, because again, we have a pretty set in stone story of what it's supposed to be. So, um,
Yep. And so okay. So moving on to our pick a flick section, and you actually kind of already alluded to it. It's my turn to throw Joey a movie off the cuff to review that he watched recently, and I want to hear more about what you thought of the original Godzilla.
okay. So I really enjoyed that movie. What? Okay, so like I said, I really enjoyed it. One of the things I kept thinking while I was watching it was what it must have been like to have watched that movie in the theaters in Japan during that time period. Like how like mind blowing that film must have been then. Um, to like, and then the first time they actually show the dinosaur, like, or show, the radioactive dinosaur, to show Gojira the first time, like I don't feel like I've ever seen anything in the theater, at least adult, that would have blown my mind like that. Like not even the first, everyone talks about the first Avengers, and yeah, that was a big moment, but I don't even think that was anything like what have seen that would have been, 60 plus years ago. Um, and as far as the actual movie itself, I mean, yeah, the effects obviously are bad, where you have like a puppet or a figure or whatever, and cars, toy cars and what have you. But that's how they did things. Um, but I just thought they did a lot of things really well. And I thought it was really funny that we're gonna build a 100 tall foot razor wired 150. It's 100 feet tall and 150-foot deep electrified razor wire fence to stop Godzilla. And I'm just like, you tell me you build that and you get back to me and you tell me how that works out for you. Um, but it was a lot better than I was honestly anticipating. I've only seen a few big monster movies, and it was very refreshing actually. It was supposed to be the precursor. That night was supposed to be Godzilla into Alien, and unfortunately we were not able to find a good way to watch Alien, so we didn't end up watching Alien, which kind of made me sad. But Godzilla was really good, and I really did.
Cool. Yeah, I actually watched Godzilla 2 nights ago, so I'm kind of on the same boat with you. I wanted to. I'm kind of teeing up a series on Letterboxd called "The Summer of Godzilla," where the Criterion Channel has all these Godzilla movies on it, so I'm really interested in seeing them. I've only seen before I'd seen the original just a few days ago. I'd only seen the remake that came out in '98. Yeah, I'm on the same page with you. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was just a little silly, the fact that Godzilla is kind of this toy, and you see all these like play jets going around. But in terms of how they shot it, I mean, it was convincing enough. I guess the major drag for me is, have you seen the original King Kong?
I have not. That's actually because of this movie. I actually am
Mhm.
very intrigued by that, because the before this, I've only seen Kong Skull Island. That's the only King Kong I've seen, and before this Godzilla, the only one I had seen was the 2014 Godzilla.
Okay. The thing that gets me is, I think the effects in King Kong, which what the Godzilla came out in like 50 something, and King Kong came out in 33, and the King Kong effects are a lot better. I mean, it is Hollywood, so I mean, they got probably more resources than I think Toho produced
Yeah, if
Godzilla.
my memory serves, it was the same company that did Seven Samurai, and it was the same year.
Yeah.
So they were about to
Oh,
go
okay.
broke, and they made those two movies, which were for them pretty high budget, and so they
I can
went
imagine.
they went for broke and survived. So
Yeah. Um yeah, it was a slow build towards Godzilla, but I thought it paid off really well. That you definitely showed him a lot towards the end, and it was and I mean, I wasn't to say they were heavy-handed with the imagery of like the atomic bomb, but I mean they had every right to be. They had the entire country got devastated uh, less than a decade prior to that due to the atomic bomb. So definitely some powerful stuff there in terms of seeing that country bounce back with you know making such a tragedy into kind of a blockbuster allegory.
yeah, and I want to
So
watch the basically where America took it and redid it and just dubbed it. Um, so I want to rewatch that version of it as well. So
yeah, I was curious of what exactly that is. I think it's called Godzilla King of the Monsters, and I watched a brief moment of it. I was like, so is this in English or what? And it seemed like there's like scenes that have been added where they show the people talking Japanese, but then it cuts to this guy and he's like, "So what exactly are they doing there?" And then this like Japanese guy like explains what's going on. I haven't seen the whole movie, just a clip, but I guess they cut around the Japanese as much as they could and added some English. So I'm curious to see the rest of it, just to see what that English product was at the time. I think 2 years after the original release.
yeah, that sounds right. From what Carl said, I mean we've got the Criterion channel, but he's also that on just Criterion disc, and so it's actually in like the supplementals on that, and so it's not like I've got the one Criterion I have actually has it as two movies and has two numbers. This one's just one number, and that's in the extras, I think. But
Oh,
yeah, so it was kind of weird. But yeah, it's just basically they cut a lot of anything mentioning, I think, like the atomic bomb is cut out, and then
Sure.
um he just shows up in America, from my understanding, and it's dubbed and all that kind of stuff, or maybe not dubbed, but got English in it. So
Yeah. All right. So moving on with the show, we got to get to our other big feature of the episode. And last week I challenged Joey to watch. Now I want to call it Lahen, but I was listening to a bunch of reviews and they kept calling it Lahen, which I don't like that name as much. But I guess we should go with probably what the most accurate pronunciation is, Lahen. Um, And for some reason, whenever I was watching this movie, I mean, you had introduced me to like Goodfellas and Boondock Saints whenever we had first met back in college. So kind of the aggressive tone of those movies made me think of you a lot while watching this, and so I wanted you to check it out for yourself.
um
What did you think of
so of the
La
two
Haine?
movies that we did for this cast, I definitely enjoyed it more. It's definitely a little bit more my style. So first things first, like in the very first scene, the first thing that just kind of caught my eye randomly was the random Bret Hart poster. Which of course fit for the
Hell
time
yeah!
period. Bret Hart was a big deal. Um, but it was just really random, and so I kind of kept going. I was like, was there going to be like a Shawn Michaels poster, or is there going to be any other Canadian wrestlers or anything like that? Which there really wasn't. But it was just this random Bret Hart poster. It was kind of the first thing. Really didn't have, as far as I could tell, anything else to
Yeah.
do with anything else, unless somebody was trying to say this guy is a hitman. But
Best there was, best there is, best there ever will be.
damn right. So um so before that part, when you had the opening credits, or the opening sequence, and they're playing the music, I definitely was picking up some, when they were showing the riots that set up the whole movie. Definitely felt like a Sublime song. And I put in my review, I definitely was picking up the song April 22 by Sublime. Now, obviously, it wasn't that song, but that was kind of the vibe I was picking up. Um, which for
It was a Bob Marley song, wasn't it?
I mean, probably.
Some kind of kind of a reggae
Yeah,
feel to
yeah.
it,
I
didn't
mean,
it?
it wouldn't surprise me if it was a Marley song. I didn't look that up, which
Yeah,
um
me neither.
but for those who aren't familiar, that's a song about a riot as well. I'm not sure which riot it is, but it's definitely a song about a riot. Um so it's kind of fitting. Um and you've got these three young guys, and they're kind of in a, not a slum like in Dodes'ka-den, but kind of in a slum, just kind of,
Ghetto. I mean, the one character
yeah,
says,
a
I'm
ghetto
stuck in the
area
ghetto.
of Paris. And I don't even want to say they're just trying to make it through their daily lives, because it doesn't seem like this is just their normal daily lives at this point. But it's after the aforementioned riot, and they have some tussles with the law enforcement. They got some tussles with some skinheads. They got some tussles with some drug dealers. Got tussles with kind of everybody, really. And you got the one kid whose name is
Yep.
Vince, who, that kid, like, you look at him funny. He
Mm-hmm.
is ready to go. He is ready to fight. And he's got a revolver,
Yep.
which he found during the riots, which we're pretty sure is the missing officers riot, which is kind of a story point. And he is just trying to act like his chest is all puffed out, like he's big and bad, like he's the big baddest, the biggest and the baddest there is, and he's ready to go. And his friend, who for most of the movie keeps a level head, and I cannot remember his name right now because I'm a
Is that you talking about Saeed or Hubert?
Hubert. There we go. Yeah, Hubert and Saeed. Hubert, for the most part, he's the one who's actually, if I'm not mistaken, has been to juvie or to jail, and he's trying to keep them level headed. I feel like there was a scene in the beginning where near the beginning where they're talking, and he said something about he asked Vince if he had been in, and Vince said no, and he said something. It made it seem like he had,
It
but
wouldn't surprise me because yeah, he seems to be the one that's like kind of had enough of this life and the projects acting tough.
it was right before they went up on the roof. Um, and then where they're having the cookout, and then the cops come, and this is just where the tensions between them and the cops are super crazy because the cops are like, "Hey, we're not going to throw you in jail. You just can't be on the roof." They're like, "Well, forget you and forget you and forget you," and they start trying to fight the cops, and the cops just wanted to move the cookout in the building, not shut them down, just in the building, and they were ready to just throw bones like right there. And
And before we get too much deeper in the detail, you want to give your overall impression, and maybe I'll give my overall impression, and then we can get a little bit deeper. Just your takeaway of the film from a whole, because I hate to like you get because you're getting really far into like the details of the film, so I want to make sure we're not backtracking too much.
okay, so my overall impression of the film was it was a good film. I enjoyed it. I feel for the style of film where it's definitely dealing with there was definitely racism that it dealt with. It definitely felt not just racism but like classism and those kind of things. I thought it was a good film. I felt that comparatively with movies like, say, American History X, which came out a few years later, which obviously is an American film, and then that it was not as good as, say, that film, or, and from my understanding, it pales in comparison to City of God. That I can't say that personally because I have not seen that movie. Um, but apparently that, like, for that style of film, City of God is apparently like the creme de la creme. But I think this was a really, like, I enjoyed this movie a lot, and um I feel like movies that have something to say, and also, I mean, there is some violence and there's some grit to it. Like, this is definitely a good one to watch, especially if you don't mind it being foreign, which obviously, as we've discussed in length several episodes ago, that doesn't bother me. So
Yeah, yeah, and this was an interesting experience for me. Really, I guess it wasn't as hard keeping up with the subtitle just because every other word was "fuck you," so you kind of got the gist of it. But just to give a little background on me on this one, so I actually found. Are you familiar with the Criterion Closet video series?
no, I can't say that I am.
I would highly recommend it. Basically, what they do is they take these acclaimed directors, and they put them in like the closet that has like all the Criterion discs in it, and they basically like pick up like, oh, here's Yojimbo. Yojimbo's awesome. This is why I love Yojimbo. And so it's all these real famous people talking about like how awesome all these different Criterions are. And so I actually learned about this from Barry Jenkins, um, the director of Moonlight, who won the Oscar a few years ago. And he's just like, man, Lahen, this was my jam in college. Me and my boys, we would get some beers and we watch Lahen like on repeat, and we loved this film. And I was like, oh, I want to check that out. And when I first saw the cover, like it shows like the guns, like the guys like pointing stuff, and I was kind of thinking it was some kind of a crime film. And so whenever I dove into it and I saw it was just like this social justice unrest kind of thing, didn't expect that at all. And just to quote the movie, so far so good. So far so good. It's not how you fall that matters; it's how you land. And boy, for me, this film nails the ending, and is the reason why I ended up giving it 5 stars because it was such a gut punch. Uh, any
The
thoughts on
ending.
that
Okay,
before I go further?
so part of the ending I really like, and then part of the ending I didn't like. So,
Okay.
they finally they make it through the night. We get to the end. Vince has his clairvoyant moment, his epiphany. He's like, I'm not going to be the big puffed up guy anymore. He hands the gun over to Hubert. Cops roll over, and it's the cop in the freaking Notre Dame jacket that you keep seeing. I don't know. He's the one who stuck out to me the most over and over. Is the cop in the freaking probably in the Notre Dame jacket, and they tussle or whatever. Gun goes off, shoots Vince in the head. Vince is dead. And then in a very, and I guess I shouldn't say a Soprano esque ending because I'm assuming that maybe the Sopranos took this from this movie, but in a Sopranos esque ending, just the fade to black. Obviously, there's the gunshot, so you don't know if Hubert shoots the cop shoots Hubert, they shoot each other. Just and it's for a movie where they did talk a lot about, there was a lot to say about social standings and that kind of stuff. I also felt that they wanted to say a lot and maybe didn't. That it's also at the end they just really they left it open ended, and it's like you in that kind of open ended ambiguous ending of, well, we don't really know what happened. But I felt with the this kind of movie that was I felt like there should have been a little bit maybe more closure there. Like we've discussed before, sometimes your imagination is more than what they show you, but I didn't feel that was the route to take there. Maybe like it's just me personally, I did not like it. It was just a personal preference. Like there needed to be something more, and I don't know exactly what it needed to be. I mean, obviously, I don't think it was like, oh my god, the worst ending in human history by any means. It was just like I wanted more. Like if you show me, because you see Hubert the whole movie, he's been, mostly reserved, and then towards the you get near the middle and the end after he gets caught up and assaulted, and you kind of see this build back towards him going back towards like a character more resembling Vin's, and you see if he shoots the cop in retaliation, then that can speak to a whole nother thing. If the cop shoots Vin's, Hubert pulls his gun, the cop shoots him, that's a whole other thing too. And then you see it, and as opposed to it's just ambiguous.
All right, so kind of my take on it, and the reason it blew me away so much is it all goes back to like the theme of the movie where hate breeds hate. So the whole movie, you have these guys that are acting tough. And like you were saying with the Bret Hart poster, and you'll notice there's a scene where Vince is acting like he's Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver. And you'll notice that there's a big poster that says, "The world is yours," just like from Scarface. There's all of this American, like 80s macho influence that these guys are like, yeah, we're bad. Fuck the police. We're badasses. And it's that mentality the whole time. And the reason the ending knocks me away so much is reality sets in. The cop's just like, yeah, whatever, we're going to rough you up. And all of a sudden his gun goes off. Bam, Vince is dead. Reality hits. And now hate breeds hate. And they got the two pointing their guns at each other. And bam, that's it. How do you land? And to me, that really just struck a chord. Um, I was going to get into the fact that with it being black and white, like I've heard a few different theories on why it's black and white. I mean, obviously it's more stylized that way, but you really get the mindset with it being black and white that these guys see things, they don't see like different shades of gray. It's either you're with us or you're against us, good, bad, very, simple, you know, black or white, more or less. And so that's I guess why it resonates with me so much.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with the black and the white. It was definitely a pretty good vibe to pick up on. Um, and the whole thing with the
Mhm.
machoism, they definitely portrayed that vibe very well um, throughout.
Yeah, Vince is a loose cannon. Like it's weird how much like whenever he finally does get it at the end, it kind of it hurts a little bit. Like the whole time you're like, man, this guy's such a chump. With like whenever they're trying to buzz in to find their friend up in the apartment, and he's like sticking his face on the camera, like, oh, where are you? Where are you? I'm a badass. I'm a badass. And he's kind of annoying. But then whenever reality sets in and he gets his head, you know, gets a bullet in his head, you're like, damn, I was starting to kind of like that guy.
Yeah, he's it was just, at that point there was a couple times, throughout the rest of the movie I kind of expected him to, to bite it, and then, you know we're clearly near the end of the movie, or that point at the very end of the movie, and I wasn't expecting, I guess, that, at that point for them, you know for it to wrap up that way, I guess. And it was just kind of like, whoa, okay, that just happened. All right.
Yeah. I think the first time I saw it, I was kind of had your same reaction in the majority of the film, but then whenever that end happened is when it kind of sealed the deal for me. Um, I guess one of the roughest scenes is whenever you do actually see the police brutality, where they like randomly take them off the street and rough them up and cause them to miss their train.
Oh yeah, and it's just, and you got the one cop who you can tell that they're training, and they're like, yeah, the hardest thing, knowing when to, take them right to the point and then stop, and
Hmm.
not going over the line, and it's like, brother, you're way past the line, and the one cop just looks so uncomfortable, but he's like,
Hmm.
I can't really say anything, and it's like, oh,
And it was interesting, like the profiling aspect of the movie. Like when they first get to like downtown Paris and they run into like a normal cop, and he's just like, "Wow, cops around here are a lot nicer." Because obviously, cops in rougher areas are going to be more on their guard, more aggressive because they're dealing with tougher customers. So that kind of hinted at that. Some more of the bit elements of this film that really stand out to me. I love the ticking clock aspect of it, where it's really counting down this day all the way up to Vince's death, and it seems like the tick 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 becomes more intense as it goes through. It's like, what are they counting down to? And we darn well see what it comes to. And they are definitely unlikable characters at times. Like I couldn't stand whenever they went to the art party and they were just being a bunch of jerks and being loud and being aggressive. So it definitely doesn't paint them to be like the most likable people, but at the same time you do. I mean, I related with them, like being obsessed with like Bret Hart and Taxi Driver, these tough characters. So like me, being a '90s kid, I can definitely relate with that, those being seen as like the cool things. And then fuck the police, like them being interested in American hip hop culture. Do you recall the scene where they talked to the Russian guy in the bathroom?
that is the bathroom.
So let me kind of set it up for you. So basically, they're all talking tough in the bathroom, and then all of a sudden, this guy comes out and he's like, "Man, that was a good shit." And he goes on this little monologue about, I didn't always have the right to take a shit because I was living in Russia and I got sent to a prison camp, and life was hell. And so it was basically like, you might be living in the projects, but at least you have a toilet to shit in. So maybe you should look on the bright side of life instead of thinking, the world's against you. And that's kind of what I took away from that.
That is somehow the one, like, I'm just blanking on that. I don't, like, I remember.
Okay. That's all right. You
Yeah,
can't
no,
catch it all
I
sometimes.
like, I remember all the stuff about Taxi Driver and like Scarface, and I remember the scene in the,
Hmm.
where they're at the museum. Because the thing, I definitely remember the scene in the museum where Hubert goes and he's talking to the girls, and he's trying to get the girl. He basically wingmanning for Saeed, and then Saeed comes over and just
Right.
shits the bed. Um,
Give me your number. What do you mean you want to talk? Yeah, he has no game. He has no game whatsoever.
It's like, and Hubert had just like laid all the groundwork and was just smooth as butter, and just,
Yeah.
yeah, no.
And then the other
Thought you
scene
were
I wanted to
different.
mention. Oh, go ahead.
And there's the girl. She's like, I thought you were different, but you're just like all the rest.
One. Have you ever seen Martin Scorsese's After Hours?
That is not one I have seen.
I definitely recommend that. That has a similar vibe to where like this guy gets caught in like downtown Manhattan, I think it is, and it's like all of like this comedy of errors of like he's like trapped in downtown Manhattan and cannot leave, and it's kind of the same feel of what these guys are experiencing being trapped in Paris with no money. Um, trying to escape, and they're just stuck down there. I mean, shoot, they go in this one lobby, and they're just kind of staring at these TV screens. And one with this being my second watch, one scene that kind of stood out to me is the scene where they do see on the news that their friend in the hospital died, and they don't really react, which kind of took me back. Took which kind of surprised me. Now, I guess they might have been like tired, so maybe it was like, oh man, he died, but oh, we're exhausted. It's been a long night. Like, I'm not really sure why they didn't react to that scene, and maybe they did, and that maybe that's the reason Vince like handed over his gun, because maybe reality set in at that point. But I think that could have
I
been
mean, yeah,
played up a
it
little
could
bit
have been
more.
Vin's, like that's when it hit him, and that's why he was handing over the gun. Or maybe it's the life that they've lived or perceived to have lived, that they're trying to be hard. You can't show weakness type thing. Possibly.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then I guess the last thing I'll note is there's kind of a weird scene where Saeed and Hubert are sitting at the bottom of an escalator, and they look up at this guy who's coming down the escalator, and he's like, "Oh, he's part of the right wing party," and then all of a sudden, like, it's like they're profiling him, and then like he doesn't like them talking about him, so they call them racist, and I'd have to dig into this scene a little bit more, because I remember it hitting me a little bit more the first time. But the first time when I watched it, what I kind of took away from was the fact that people are really quick to call each other racist. Like, that's such a vague term. Like, to me, racism means like hate towards another ethnicity, where in our modern culture, a lot of people refer to racism as in noticing a difference between a different ethnicity. And that's not hate, that's just noticing things. And so I think the word gets used a little bit too generously in our PC culture. I don't know if
I
you want to touch this.
I understand where you're coming from. Like, racism, I feel, definitely has to deal more with hatred and negativity towards people of other races and cultures, um, than just, oh look, there's a person that's different. But I guess where some people, where they're
Right.
saying that from is you're, oh, you commented that this person's different. Why do you think this person's different? Why do you think that that's worth noting? You must think that that's a negative thing. Whereas where they taking it from the other side
Mm,
is, oh, well, it's different. That's interesting. Or I've never seen a person that's different, even though, that's generally not the case unless maybe it's a small child or something. But,
mhm,
maybe, this person's different, and is an
mhm.
interesting thing. I want to learn more about their culture, etc. So, but yeah, it's, racism is a place of hatred, but unfortunately there's still so many people that are, full of hatred. I mean, it's just an unfortunate thing.
Yeah. And then there's those people that like they'll read too much into a certain thing and think, oh well, what are they really thinking? And I don't know. At the end of the day, I just think we should all get along. We're all human.
I mean, yes, we're all human. We all get along. We should all, love one another and make things a lot easier
Yeah,
and better.
it's a touchy subject, but yeah, and I'm sure we could bring somebody else into this conversation, and they would come at it from their a whole different point of view, and it's all about talking out your differences. So, all right, going to the grand rating scale. Like I said, it's still 5 stars for me. That ending just knocks me out. It's like when I was telling you, like, the kind of movies I love, and it's the way that this one really brought it always brings chills to me. Whenever I see how powerful that ending for me, that's the reason I think it's a masterpiece.
All right, this is probably going to sound a little weird. I gave it 3.5. I didn't think overall as a movie it was probably done as well as Dodes'ka-den, which, like I said earlier, I gave 4. But I definitely enjoyed watching it more. I would definitely watch it before I watched Dodes'ka-den. If someone was like, "Hey, I've never seen this movie. Do you want to watch it?" I would sit down and watch it
Hmm.
again. It'd probably be one, shopping and came across it as Criterion, I'd probably pick it up. So, but
Yeah.
just overall as a movie, I just didn't. I just thought the camera work and stuff in the other one was better. So
Okay. And yeah, we didn't really mention there's a lot of like interesting like zooms and stuff in this one. I mean, just little style things, but I think the heart of this story is the social message it brings. And I glanced at your review. I'll probably read it more in depth now that we've talked. But I saw you, like you'd mentioned earlier, compared it to American History X, and it's been a long, long time since I've seen that one. Now, I want to say that I felt American History X was more directly racism focused in its message and
yes,
like in changing people, and to where this one I think it's more of like a mindset of somebody. um so I'm not really sure where I'm going with that. I don't, I guess I didn't see the films as similar as you may have. Is that accurate?
that's possible. I mean, but yes, you're correct. American History X is definitely racism. And there was shot a little bit differently. There was flashbacks in the American History X as Edward Furlong when he was doing his telling the story, and they're in the flashback parts. They were in black and white, so you had that part that was
Okay.
similar, but it was definitely about there was hatred and culture and that kind of. So there were definitely some similarities, maybe not a true one to one, but I definitely saw there was some similarities. Because the families were growing up in poor areas and parts and things of that nature, and there was so, but
Lahain
just
came out 3 years earlier.
yeah. Well, Lahen came out in '95. That came out in '98. So yeah.
Sorry, I had to.
Oh no, I knew
Okay.
Lahen came out first. That wasn't a problem. I think of all of the challenge movies so far, this one has been my favorite. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I tried this time. After I botched Dogville, I was like, I better give him something he can chew on. That he's gonna, at least a hamburger, maybe not a steak. I guess I'm still aiming at that steak.
Nah, it's fine, man. I mean, that's kind of the whole idea. I mean,
Yeah,
I pitched up like a stupid, just dumb, turn your brain off comedy, and you watch art house movies, so like it's all good.
yeah. It's all about explaining each other's kind of point of reference. All right. So last time I challenged Joey, so this time it's his turn. What you got for me, Joey?
All right, so I think enough people have listened to our show to know that I like to keep some sort of on theme. So at the
Okay.
beginning, I used a quote from Drive, and the quote was said by one Ryan Gosling.
Uh huh.
So our movie today is a challenge for you to star one Ryan Gosling. Um, from
Okay.
2013, Gangster Squad. Um,
Oh.
Yes,
Okay.
I initially tried to find a movie, a quote from either La La Land or Crazy Stupid Love, since it starred both those movies both starred him and Emma Stone, but I couldn't find one that wasn't like a back and forth between the two that I liked. Um,
Interesting. And my only knowledge of this is it got pushed back in theaters because of that doggone what Dark Knight Rises massacre.
was it? I think it was Dark. Was it Dark Knight Rises or Dark Knight?
It was Dark Knight Rises
Okay,
because yeah, that was real unfortunate. Pretty sure. Um yeah, I think then they like cut out a movie theater shooting scene because of that. So yeah, I it's been totally off my radar. Um so yeah, that'll be neat to check out Gangster Squad for next time.
yeah, and I have not watched it. I think I've only watched it the one time. I really enjoyed it. So I mean, I
Okay.
like mobster movies. This is a mobster movie, so yeah, let's go.
Yeah, sure, why not? And so that brings us to the point of the show where I pick another film off of Joey's list, and that's going to be Sebastian Leon's Disobedience. I believe it's an NC-17 lesbian film starring Rachel Wise. So I'm really curious to see that. I was really enjoy Blue is the Warmest Color earlier this year, I believe I saw that. So I've heard some comparisons between the two. So I'm very interested to see what that's all about.
I'm not gonna lie. I actually expected you to pick that the last time you picked because the cast right before it, you mentioned you had talked about being compared to like Blue is the Warmest Color. I don't remember how we came about it, but that had been mentioned. So when you
Yeah, you gave that to me for Pick a Flick, and so I had brought it up. But yeah, I guess I was really feeling art house last time, but this time it was between that and J. Edgar, and I was like, I really want to get to Disobedience, so that'll be for next time.
all right, so I feel like we'll have some good across the spectrum with Disobedience and Gangster Squad. So
Yeah, some gangsters and sexually driven drama. We'll see.
oh,
Stay tuned.
and that even works out crazy because Disobedience has it has what's her name? It has why am I blanking on this girl's name? Jesus Christ.
Rachel McAdams.
Yes, it has Rachel McAdams. There we go. That's the one I was looking for. Who was in the
I don't know how I
Notebook?
thought of that.
Was in the Notebook with Ryan Gosling.
Oh right,
Yeah.
7 degrees of Rachel McAdams.
It's not even 7. It's real easy. It's 1.
Yeah, there you go. All right, thanks for listening, and to the Average Joe's Movie Club cast. Hope you enjoyed us chatting up different films like Lahen, Dodes'ka-den, and even Baby Driver and Drive Up at the beginning. Make sure to check out our day-to-day updates on a Letterboxd to hear all about our thoughts on movies on a frequent basis. You can find our Letterboxd information in the show description.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for following the show. And if you enjoy listening to us chat, make sure to hit subscribe. And if you would like for us to answer a question on the show, just send it to the Average Joe's Movie Clubcast at gmail.com.
All right. Happy movie watching, everyone. Skull.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a good night.